With that, let's turn now to the latest business news. And well, shares in the oil giant Saudi Aramco have gone on sale in Riyadh. Our business editor Stephen Carl is here to tell us more about that. Stephen.
Eve, this is an absolutely huge deal for the markets in general. Saudi Aramco's shares have jumped by 10%, the maximum possible, in just the first few minutes of trading, reaching, of course, making Saudi Aramco the world's most valuable publicly listed company. This comes after what has already been a record-breaking initial public offering of shares. The kingdom had been trying to drum up demand for the stocks ahead of today's launch, including from state investment funds. That seems to have worked, given the sudden rise in the share price. The numbers involved in this company are absolutely staggering. It provides around a tenth of the world's oil supply. The initial public offering, so before today, raised over $25 billion, valuing the company at $1.7 trillion. Even after that jump in the first few minutes of trading, that figure is now close to $1.9 trillion, the world's most valuable publicly listed company. Moving on to the new North American trade deal between the US, Canada and Mexico. Trade negotiators from the three countries have signed a revised version of the deal in Mexico City. This after changes were demanded by Democrats in the US House of Representatives, whose support is needed to pass the deal. The USMCA replaces the 25-year-old NAFTA, which had been fiercely criticised by President Donald Trump. Camille Nedelec reports.
After a year of renegotiations, a breakthrough. The US, Mexico and Canada have a new free trade deal. For once, US President Donald Trump and Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi agree on something.
There is no question, of course, that this trade agreement is much better than NAFTA. But in terms of our work here, it is infinitely better than what was initially proposed by the administration. We're declaring victory for the American worker.
Also a welcome win for the president, who described it as the best and most important trade deal ever made by the USA. Critics of the 1994 NAFTA Accords say it hurt America's blue-collar workers, as it meant factories based in the US could move south of the border to Mexico and hire workers for a fraction of the price of an American worker, only to then send the finished product back to the United States tariff-free. But the deal also created jobs and was a big boost to GDP. Now, up to 45% of cars will have to be made in countries that pay their workers at least $16 per hour. In other words, not Mexico. The deal required labor reforms in Mexico to avoid an unfair competitive advantage. Democrats also pushed for changes in the digital and pharmaceutical sectors, as well as for improved environmental protections. The agreement on Tuesday clears the way for the deal to be voted through by lawmakers in all three countries before it finally becomes law.
Next to the latest on the trade war between the United States and China, reports today saying that Beijing and Washington are preparing to delay an increase in tariffs scheduled for this Sunday. The 15th of December had been seen as a kind of deadline to get the so-called Phase 1 agreement concluded. The Wall Street Journal saying that both sides have indicated now that date could slip. Well, that's one of the big stories moving the markets today. Shares in Europe starting the day in positive territory, although not by very much. Interesting to see some of Saudi Aramco's rivals, like the French oil giant Total, seeing their shares down this morning. This is the picture across London, Paris and Frankfurt. In Asia, trade was a big focus there too. Most markets trading up towards the end of their trading day. Hang Seng's Hong Kong up by 0.8%, just the Nikkei in Tokyo there finishing in the red. And we're also keeping an eye on the value of the British pound for you today ahead of tomorrow's general election in the UK. It has dipped against the dollar and the euro. This was after one poll suggested the ruling Conservatives had lost much of their lead over the Labour Party. It's a weaker pound we're seeing today, but it is worth pointing out that the pound has been strengthening in the days running up to this as the likelihood of a Conservative victory seemed more possible. So we're still looking at levels fairly strong for the pound, but that is where we will see big movement, of course, as we get the results of the election in the UK on Friday. HSBC is to pay more than $190 million in fines after it admitted helping American customers to hide more than $1 billion in assets from tax authorities. It's part of a deferred prosecution agreement with the US Department of Justice. The DOJ says HSBC's Swiss branch conspired with US account holders to conceal their assets abroad and evade tax. Well, finally for me, Netflix says that Martin Scorsese's film The Irishman has been viewed by more than 26 million households in its first week on the streaming platform. This is according to the company's head of content, but it is unusual for Netflix to give out viewing figures for its series or movies. The only comparison we have is with the Sandra Bullock film Bird Box, which drew an audience of 45 million in its first week, so more than The Irishman. Netflix is facing mounting competition from the likes of Apple and Disney, both of which recently launched rival streaming services. Netflix might continue to drip feed out this information, but I have a feeling we might only hear the good news from them as opposed to the ones that didn't work.
And I'm wondering, like, the minute you start watching, I guess that counts as being viewed, even though you mightn't have watched.
I think they measured out, so you have to actually have watched a decent amount of it.
Okay, good to know. Stephen Carroll, thanks a lot for that business update.